it's really important that we ask ourselves, why would you want to go to graduate school in the United States? And the first answer is because of the wide array of options that are going to be available to you when you do. I would love for some of you all to type in the questions and comments box how many universities are available in your countries, because I know in Belgium, where I'm coming from, there are only around 15 to 20 universities that Belgian students can attend for their graduate studies. And so that's a really limited number of options. In the U.S., there are around 4,706 accredited institutions of higher education for you to choose from. And so we'll talk about some of the resources that'll help you narrow down that list of schools when you're searching for the one that's perfect for you. But that should excite you, not intimidate you, this list of options that's available to you. Also, the flexibility of the curriculum in the United States is a really big draw for many international students. Many countries train their students to choose one field of study and follow that path throughout their entire life. So you study law in your bachelor's degree and your master's degree, and then you practice law until you die. But in the United States, we really value what's called a liberal arts education, or a very well-rounded education, where you're taking courses in fields that may not be your major focus of study or in your professional career. So you can combine political science and journalism, for example, if you wanted to be a reporter on political affairs. You could study public policy and biology if you were interested in the policy that regulates stem cell research. There are a lot of different options, especially at the graduate level, that allow you to specialize in the United States. And it's not all academic study. The U.S. campuses are vibrant with different activities for you to partake in. There's lots of different clubs and sports options for you to get involved in. And so we're really excited to see you get there and hear about what your experiences are. The last two items of why you should study in the U.S. are to internationalize your CV. So we all know that English is becoming the lingua franca of business in the world. And so it's really important when employers see that U.S. higher education experience on your degree, they'll recognize that you're proficient in English, that you're flexible, that you can adapt to different cultures. And that is really valuable in on a lot of CVs. And so you're really making an investment in your career when you're choosing to get a graduate degree in the United States. And finally, the opportunity to travel to the United States. So this is the land that I call home. It's quite large. I'm from Kentucky, which, let's see if I can get my pointer working, is over here on the East Coast. And it would take me about 3 days to make that pathway all the way over to California. So it's quite a large country, and we hope you'll get the opportunity to travel. This man has made it a lot easier for us to convince international students that the U.S. is a safe and comfortable place for them to travel and pursue their graduate studies. So I just want to review the different levels of study in the United States. In order to pursue a graduate education, you need to have a bachelor's degree from your home country. In the U.S., undergraduate education is a little bit different. It's 4 years long as opposed to 3 years in many of the countries that you may be coming from. But the end result is a bachelor's degree. So in the U.S., we have a distinction between a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science. Many of you won't have that distinction, and it's okay. When you're filling out your application, it's just really important to indicate that you do, in fact, have a bachelor's degree. At the graduate level, we're going to start to see a lot of different letters. So we see MA, MS, MBA, PhD, JD, MD. What are the differences between all of these degrees? It's really important that you know. A Master's of Arts is an MA, and a Master's of Science is an MS. The only real difference between these two types of degrees is how technical they become in the curriculum that they provide. A Master's of Arts tends to be more holistic in its teaching methods, while a Master of Science tends to be more specific and technical. A Master's of Business Administration is the right path if you're looking to be an entrepreneur or to really manage a company. It'll give you the expertise in financial accounting and reporting and management and leadership. And a lot of people think that they want to pursue an MBA when really they'd be happy with a Master's of Arts or Sciences in a different field, such as management or accounting. So if there's one aspect of business that interests you, then you can also look for a Master's of Arts or Science in that field. If you're looking for a more holistic business education, then an MBA is right for you. A PhD is usually a 4 to 7 year degree in the United States, where you'll write a doctoral thesis, and it's very in-depth, specialized research. JD and MD degrees are not as often pursued by international students as they are by U.S. students. A JD is a Juris Doctorate, or legal training that we receive in the United States after we finish our undergraduate degree. It's a 3-year master's degree that gets you a Juris Doctorate and allows you to practice law in the United States. What most international students tend to do if they're interested in graduate studies in the field of law is pursue an LLM, or a Master's of Law in the United States, and we can talk about that later. An MD is if you're interested in pursuing medical school in the United States. What's interesting to note is that many PhD programs in the United States do not always require a master's degree to apply, and the reason that is because many PhD programs include the training and the classes necessary to earn a master's degree during the PhD program, which is why they can take 7 years to complete. So, the different types of degrees that we talked about, master's degrees, it can be anywhere from 1 to 3 years long after the bachelor's degree, and I get a lot of questions about, are there 1-year MBA programs, or what's another 1-year master's degree that I can pursue, and some of the search engines that we'll talk about that you can use to search for the graduate programs that interest you allow you to indicate that preference for a quicker graduate school experience. There are different specialized fields of study, and we'll also talk about how you can use those to search. And then it's important to know that master's degrees can be academic or professional, and can include a thesis or a non-thesis track. So if you're wanting to go into academia, meaning that you want to become a researcher at a university, or you want to be a postdoctoral candidate, or a lecturer eventually. If you want to be involved in the university setting as a career, then you need to pursue an academic master's degree that does involve writing a thesis, because those writing skills are really important if you're going to go on to do a PhD or teach. But there are a lot of degrees out there that are professional in nature, meaning that they place huge emphasis on having professional experience as a requirement for admission, but also they place a lot of emphasis on internships in the curriculum once you're admitted to the school. A lot of those programs will have non-thesis options, meaning that you don't have to focus on research and writing a paper. You can really focus on practically implementing the knowledge that you're gaining during that graduate program. A doctoral degree can be 4 to 7 years beyond a bachelor's degree, and they can also be academic or professional. So an example of a doctoral degree that you may never have heard of is an EDD, or an educational doctorate. So that's for people who are looking to go into higher education administration and want to do a PhD in that field. I'm seeing your questions come in. Don't worry, I will answer them towards the end. So give me just a minute to make my way through the presentation. So some differences that you can expect when you're starting the graduate school process to apply to the U.S. is that we have no ranking system or central government authority that collects all of this data about our schools. So there are ranking systems out there, such as U.S. News and World Report, that will try to tell you the best school for you to go to. However, I really want to emphasize that it's all about finding the right fit for you. So there are a lot of great named schools out there that some people have never heard of, but their programs are really strong, and the research that's being produced by their professors is really well known. So it's really important that you take the time to find the school that's the right fit for you. It is a long application process, and I don't want to hide that fact from you at the beginning, because applying to U.S. graduate schools, as we'll talk about in just a little bit, requires taking entrance exams such as the GRE or the GMAT, the TOEFL or the IELTS, and these tests are an investment because they do cost money. It also requires gathering letters of recommendation, writing personal statements. But it's all worth it, because once you get there, there are also great differences on the campus, such as the teaching and classroom style. I'm not sure what country all of you all are coming from, but in Belgium, a lot of students are lectured to, meaning they go to class, they sit down in the classroom, and they listen to a lecture for an hour and a half. In the United States, that would be very rare to see at the graduate level. Professors are really expecting you to do the reading and the work before you come to class. They're expecting you to raise your hand in the classroom and have a discussion. They're expecting you to work with your peers. And so the teaching and classroom styles are really different. Also different are the on-campus life and opportunities that you have available to you. So, for most people, it's going to take 12 to 18 months to apply and get admitted to a U.S. graduate school before you leave. During these year to year and a half, we advise that you pick 1 to 6 programs that interest you. This is not a set number. This is what we recommend. We tell people not to only apply to their top choice university, to also pick some backup schools, because it is such a long application process that it's really unfortunate if you go through the whole thing and then you're not admitted to your first choice school. So it's always a good idea to have some safety schools. Evaluate your motivation and objectives for applying, because this is really going to shine through when you're writing your personal statement. Determine all the requirements and write them down on an Excel sheet is what we usually recommend to our advisees. Register for the required tests if you need to take tests. I saw a question earlier in the questions section that asked me, do all U.S. graduate programs require the GRE for admission? And the answer is no, that there are some graduate programs out there that do not require the GRE or the GMAT, and that do have alternate ways to verify your English proficiency besides the TOEFL or the IELTS. So it's really important that you check with the programs that you're applying to see what their admissions requirements are. And finally, note all the deadlines on a calendar, because unfortunately they're different for every school, so sometimes it can be a little bit different or hard to keep track of. So, how do we choose from these 4,706 accredited institutions of higher education in the United States? Well, these are some key points to keep in mind. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the school is accredited. Accreditation means that the school has been evaluated by an outside entity and its curriculum has been verified as being strong, relevant, and transferable to other universities. So if you begin your master's program and decide that you don't like the courses that you're taking or you want to switch to another university, it's easier to transfer academic credits from one university to another if the university you're attending is accredited. Accreditation can also be important when you're seeking a job and you're a mobile individual. And so accreditation is important for people like accountants who are seeking a certified public accountant's licensure and items like that. It's also important to take into consideration the size of the university that you'll be attending, because graduate programs in the U.S. can vary from very small, a couple hundred people, to thousands and thousands of people. So it's really important that you really do your research to know what the size is like. And the location, because as an international student, many of you all will not be coming to the U.S. with a car. And so there are a lot of cities in the United States that don't have the public transportation that's available to you in some of your countries. But also it's important to take into consideration the climate of the U.S. city that interests you and its location. Will you have easy access to other U.S. cities? These are all things to take into consideration when you're choosing a graduate program, because especially at the graduate level, many of you all will be traveling quite frequently to go present your research at conferences. It's important to take into account the programs offered if they match your academic interests, but also take into account the other academic programs that are offered outside of your own interests. And what I mean by that is a lot of graduate schools will allow their graduate students in a variety of different fields to work with their students from their MBA or Master's of Business Administration degree programs to collaborate on business projects in different fields of study. And that kind of cross-disciplinary collaboration can be a really large benefit when you're attending graduate school in the U.S. So I really encourage you to check out whether the school that you're attending not only has your interested field of study, but also other fields of study like an MBA degree. You're going to take into account the opportunities that are available for publishing your work, for attending conferences, to network with alumni. These are all things that the graduate programs that interest you can give you more information on when you're applying. And finally, it's important to take into consideration the costs. So when we're looking at accreditation, there's an easy website that you can go to that's listed on your screen right now. It's www.chea.org/search. CHEA is an accreditation agency where you can type in the name of the school and it will tell you whether or not the school has been accredited. These are some search engines that you can use online to type in the field of study that interests you, the city that has caught your eye, the size of the school that you're interested in, the costs that you're able to afford. The more specific that you can be in the factors that you're looking for in a U.S. graduate program, the more helpful these online search engines will be. Petersons.com is the most frequently referred to one that we help our advisees with, but also gradschools.com, princetonreview.com, topmba.com is really helpful for those of you interested in MBA programs in the U.S., and of course PhDs.org is really great for those of you looking for doctoral programs or even postgraduate positions in the United States. And while these search engines can be helpful, I really want to emphasize to you that you really should take time to do in-person research. And what I mean by that is searching academic publications within your field of study to see what U.S. graduate programs the authors are coming from. You should be networking at conferences and through your professors, asking them, do they know of any of their U.S. colleagues who would be interested in accepting a graduate school student in that field. It's really important because having a supportive professor at the graduate program that you apply to in the U.S. can be invaluable for conducting research, but also getting that research published and getting funding for the research. Finally, I encourage you to check out the websites of professional organizations in your field. So for example, if I have anyone in here interested in international affairs, there's an Association of Professional Schools in International Affairs, or apsia.org, that you can refer to. So those websites tend to be really helpful. And before we get into the application process, educationusa.info is a really helpful site. If you go to your 5 steps to U.S. study and choose what you're interested in, whether it be graduate degrees, English language programs, or short-term programs, will help walk you through the steps of applying and make sure that you're staying on task. So, when you're applying to U.S. graduate schools, the first step is understanding your admissions requirements. Are there certain scores that you need to achieve on tests? What documents do you have to have in order to be able to apply? The next thing that we're going to do is request transcripts. A transcript is a document that shows the courses that you've completed, whether in your bachelor's degree or in your master's degree, and it'll also talk about the grades and marks that you've received in each course. A transcript can be official, an original, or a certified copy. Most schools are going to require original copies of the transcripts sent directly from the universities that you attended, wherever you went and completed your bachelor's degree. However, many of them will not have the capacity to evaluate those transcripts, their authenticity, and what those grades mean from your particular country on their own. And so some of them will ask you to have them translated into English, or they will ask you to have them evaluated by a foreign credential evaluation service. And I've listed the names of some popular ones here. So WES, or World Education Services, ACRO, NACES, all of these institutions are organizations that you can pay to evaluate your transcripts and tell the U.S. graduate program that you're applying to the quality of your degree. This is what a transcript looks like. You can see that there's a course name and number over here, and let me get my pointer going, a course name and number over here, as well as a course description. The credit hours that were achieved, so for example in Europe that would be ECTS hours, and then, oh, my computer seems to be frozen. Sorry, here we go. And then grades achieved, as well as your name and personal information as a student. After you've got your transcripts taken care of, you need to consider whether or not the U.S. graduate program that you're applying to will require an entrance exam, such as the GRE or GMAT. As I said before, not all graduate programs in the U.S. will require one of these exams. Many U.S. universities, if you completed your bachelor's degree at that school, will not require a GRE exam if you're matriculating directly into your master's at the same school. A lot of programs in education will not require the GRE. Some schools who are maybe looking to recruit more international students will have lower entrance exam barriers. So those are all important things to take into account. For those of you who are looking to complete an MBA degree in the United States, most schools will require the GRE or the GMAT. Some business schools still require the GMAT only. The GMAT is a test that ranges in score from 2 to 800, and it requires these different sections that I'm going to highlight here for you. So it has an analytical writing assessment, an integrated reasoning, and a quantitative and verbal section. These integrated reasoning section and the analytical writing is really what makes it more different from the GRE. In these sections, you're going to be given sometimes ambiguous data or information to decipher. You're going to be given numbers and asked to make a decision, a business decision, based on the information that you do have. And so it's really looking to see what reasoning and decision-making skills you do have that will be necessary if you're to succeed in an MBA program and later on in the world of business in the United States. To sign up for the GMAT exam, you're going to go to www.mba.com, and scores are usually available within 2 or 3 weeks after you take the exam. Most competitive business schools, I always get this question, is what should I score on the GMAT? A lot of business schools will tell you the range of scores that they're looking for, or they'll at least provide an average of what the alumni in their program have achieved. However, a good score, I would say, is somewhere above 550 or 600. You need to achieve that level to get into a good MBA program in the United States. For the GRE, many graduate schools in the United States do require the GRE exam for entrance, except for LLM degree programs. Those do not. GRE is a quantitative and qualitative test, meaning it will test your verbal skills, your reading skills, as well as your quantitative analysis skills. So some of you may need to brush up on your math. It's scored from 130 to 170. 160, I would say, is a very competitive score. And these scores are usually available also within 2 weeks after you take the exam, and they're good for 5 years. You can go to takethegre.com to learn more, but what's important to know when you're considering when to take the GRE is that you can register up to 3 months in advance, but spots fill often in certain countries very quickly. And so it's really important that you take the time to know when you want to take the exam and register early, and early enough so that you will have 2 weeks for your scores to be sent to the U.S. graduate program before the application deadline, because these scores are considered a part of your application, and it's really important that they're submitted to the U.S. graduate school in time for you to apply. The English tests that are often required for entrance are the TOEFL, IELTS, and very rarely the Pearson. So TOEFL and IELTS are 2 English proficiency exams. They're testing your reading, your writing, your speaking, and your comprehension skills. The real main difference between the TOEFL and the IELTS are whether or not the test is digitized. So a TOEFL exam is often, in most countries, taken on a computer. In some countries, it will be taken as a paper exam. But for the speaking section, you're speaking to a computer or an automated service. So a question will be posted on the screen. Tell us about your study methods and why you think that's right for you. And so you have 30 seconds to formulate your thoughts and relay them in a concise answer, all in English. So you can say, my preferred study method is in groups. I really enjoy hearing the opinions of other people while I study. It helps me to bring new perspectives to the material that I'm learning, but also to remember the basic core concepts. And that would be an example of a TOEFL answer. For an IELTS, it's always a paper-based exam, and you're always going to be speaking with a human being during the speaking section. This makes some people very comfortable. They really like seeing the face and conversing with the person. For others, it can make them really uncomfortable speaking to a human. So it's really important. The websites are here for you to go and register for these exams. A lot of people will ask me on the note of English proficiency exams whether or not these can be waived. And it is really important to have that discussion with the graduate programs that you're applying to. If you already completed a full bachelor's or master's degree in English, oftentimes this requirement can be waived for you as an international student. Some schools are willing to interview you in place of an English proficiency exam. So there are different options available to you out there. The next thing that you're going to have to consider is asking for recommendation letters. So you can ask your professors or supervisors from professional settings such as internships or jobs, and you should choose someone who knows you well inside and outside of the classroom. So it's really important. People ask me all of the time, I know someone who's very high level, who's considered an expert in my field. Should I have them write my recommendation letter? And my answer is, don't have them write your recommendation letter unless they're very familiar with your work and can really provide details about your work style and what they think of it. So in the recommendation letter, you're going to ask your references to include the length and capacity of your relationship with them. So how long have they known you? Have they been a teacher for you in 5 classes or just 2? Did they have involvement with you in an extracurricular club outside of the classroom? Where maybe you demonstrated your academic interests and translated those into the community. They're going to provide quality and examples of your academic and professional work and provide a comparison to others when possible. This is really important because a lot of recommendation letters, if the reference isn't invested in your application process, will just say, so-and-so is a great student. She always shows up to class on time, and she raises her hand quite frequently and provides insightful conversation in the classroom. I highly recommend her for Harvard University. This is not a strong recommendation letter because it doesn't provide specific examples of so-and-so's abilities in the classroom. So talk about specific projects where the student has excelled, or one instance where she raised her hand in the classroom and provoked such a discussion, and what arose out of that. What was the accomplishment or the end result? And of course, they want to hear about your potential to do well. So a reference should really state your abilities to fit into the U.S. graduate program that you're applying to. It's important when you're thinking of asking for recommendation letters to think ahead and build relationships with professors and supervisors so that you do have strong relationships to build on when you're going to need these letters. Ask early and in person for these letters. Oftentimes people will ask for letters of recommendation via email, but it's really nice if you can sit down with the reference person and talk about your motivation for applying, and also explain to them the items that are included on your CV and the different application elements that you're going to be highlighting during the application process. This is really important so that you can provide a holistic application to the U.S. graduate program. If your references are mentioning certain activities that you're performing outside of the classroom and you're mentioning those activities in your personal statement as well, it really provides the school or the graduate program a very holistic view of you as a candidate. And finally, it's really important that if these reference letters need to be mailed or uploaded online, that you do what's necessary to follow up with the reference people and to make sure that the letter is sent. Finally, we need to talk about writing the personal statement, which is an essay, usually between 500 to 800 words, that discuss your past qualifications and where your interests stem from, as well as what you're doing right now and what makes it the right time and place for you to be applying to a U.S. graduate school. Finally, you'll talk about your details and your plans for the future and how you plan to use that degree to move forward with your plans. It's important that this essay is clear, concise, specific, and persuasive. So, in order to write one, you'll start by taking a look at your CV and thinking about what separates you from other applicants. What makes your profile interesting? What tells your story on your resume? And then brainstorm examples of how you've demonstrated your interest and expertise in the field. Think about a story that would be relevant to someone else who would be reading your essay. And think about how the program fits in with your future plans. Research the program's websites, and then allow ample time to draft an essay that combines all of this information together and allow for people to read it, because often we get so involved in writing these essays ourselves that we often tend to miss small grammar mistakes that we've included, or we don't think about the different perspective that we haven't addressed or included in our essays. And so it's really important that you write multiple drafts and have them edited by your friends or professors or colleagues. So I've included an example answer here of what a personal statement could look like. So in Belgium, we all know that Belgian beer is quite popular. So a common introduction could be, when I was 17 years old, my father took me to a Belgian brewery for the first time. Since then, I've been conducting my own brewing experiments and selling products to local shops. So it tells where my interest in my potential U.S. graduate program is stemming from. I found my interest when I was doing this activity. It's a story, it involves my father, and I'm sharing a bit of my personal life with the selection committee. Later on in the essay, I'm going to go on to explain that I have the passion for the brewing that I've been doing, but I want to understand the mechanics, the science aspects of the brewing a little bit more and learn how to scale the demand for my product. So I'm telling what I already know, where my passion stems from, but why I would really benefit in the here and now from getting extra information about what I'm wanting to learn. XYZ School dual MS MBA program will enable me to achieve this, and as a result, I'll be able to spread my good beer throughout Belgium and introduce others to the joy of locally made beer that my father introduced me to as well. So let's talk about some of the things I did well in that essay. I did keep in mind the purpose of the statement, which is I'm applying to a graduate program, a dual MS MBA program that I want more technical knowledge from about scaling demand for a very technical scientific product. I didn't include a lot of extraneous material, so I didn't go off and talk about a lot of details about the time my father took me to the brewery when I was 17 years old. I only included 1 or 2 sentences about that. I was very brief. I drew conclusions about the value of my experiences instead of elaborating on the experiences themselves. And that's where a lot of international students get hung up when they're writing their essays. They will talk a lot about experiences that influence them, but they won't really talk about why they influence them. They'll just recount the story. And so it's really important that you draw conclusions and not focus on the details. You should tell a story and find an angle. For that example essay, the angle was how my father inspired my passion. I mentioned him in my introduction. I also mentioned him in my conclusion. And it's really important that you concentrate on your opening paragraph, but also follow up with that story when you conclude. Use clear examples whenever possible, and don't forget to brag. Some things you shouldn't do are mention your grades or test scores, or repeat information that the selection committee can find elsewhere in your application. Usually, graduate selection committees are reading a lot of applications for a very limited number of positions to the school. And so it's really important that you're concise and clear in your application. That you use the essay to really talk about what can't be seen in other parts of the application. Don't be too casual or use contractions, and focus on your reaction to challenges, not the challenges themselves. Try to avoid controversial issues if you can, such as politics or religion, and don't be repetitive or contradictory, or tell the reader what is important in your field. So a lot of essays that I'll read for graduate admissions will talk about why what the person wants to study is important. But of course, the people who are working at these admissions offices will already know the popular and important topics within the field. So it's really important that you don't use the space on telling them why the topic you want to study is important, but why your involvement with that topic is important and how you plan to make advancements in the field. So this is an exercise that we usually share with our advisees. I'm not going to go over it, but these are just a few tips that you can share with someone when you're asking them to help review the drafts of your personal statement. So you've chosen 1 to 6 universities or graduate programs, and you've prepared the applications for each one. We've now determined what tests are needed, and we've registered for them. And now comes the really important part. We're going to look for financial support. And the reality is that most international students' primary source of funding for graduate school in the United States is coming from their personal or family funds. That's 50% of people who use personal funds as their primary source of funding. And so the reality is that U.S. graduate education is a personal investment that you're making, and it will often require some level of finances on your own part. However, there is a large other portion you can see from this pie chart. 42% used money directly from the U.S. graduate programs that they were applying to in order to finance the experience. And that money can come in the form of fellowships or scholarships. The very rare few are able to use scholarships such as Fulbright or other sources of funding from their foreign government or university that will allow them to pursue their graduate studies in the States. So personal funding, money from the U.S. University in form of a research fellowship, a teaching assistantship, or a salary, and we'll talk about all these different titles in a minute. You can also get a loan to finance your U.S. graduate education. Often, if you're going and asking for a loan from a U.S. bank, they will require a U.S. cosigner. A cosigner is someone who signs their name on the loan contract and agrees to pay back the loan if you default on any of the payments. And then, of course, there are scholarships from other organizations such as Fulbright and Rotary. A lot of people will ask me if, when I refer to personal funds, if they can work a job on a U.S. university campus to pay for the graduate school experience. And the reality is that when you're traveling to the U.S. as an international student, you're on a J1 or F1 visa, meaning that you're only allowed to work up to 20 hours per week or part-time when school is in session, and 40 hours per week full-time on school vacations and breaks. It depends on the wage that you're making, but usually this only averages out to a couple $1,000s per year, which is not enough to fund a U.S. graduate experience. It's important that you contact your on-campus advisor if you're considering pursuing employment activities during your graduate studies. And it's also important to ask your campus's career services office about any internship opportunities that they may have, as that is also available to you when you study in the United States. And it's a very exciting part of the U.S. experience, is performing an internship often during your graduate schools. Excuse me. So, as forms of financial aid are assistantships and fellowships. They're very similar, meaning that the money is often coming from the school for an assistantship in exchange for work that you are performing. So it can be for researching, for teaching, or for performing administrative work. It often covers tuition and a small stipend, but it's really important that you ask the U.S. graduate programs that you're applying to about teaching or research assistantships early on, as usually departments have a very limited budget to offer students these types of opportunities. Fellowships are money that you receive in exchange for no work. Often it's based on your merit. Sometimes they will come with contractual obligations, such as working for a specific company after you graduate from school, but they're often merit-based, sometimes need-based, and they come from governments, institutions, as well as schools. They often offer programming opportunities as well. So this is the reality of aid that's available by field, and I'm not going to go over it in detail, but this is just to show you that most of the funding for U.S. graduate programs lie in the STEM fields, so science, technology, engineering, or math. Funding becomes harder to find when you move into the humanities and social sciences, but it is possible, and it becomes even harder to find when you go into professional fields such as businesses or law. These are some examples of foundations that you can look into if you're a science student and are interested in learning more about fellowships available to you in the sciences. And these are some fellowships that you can look into if you're interested in studying humanities at the U.S. graduate level. As I said before, loans are a common form of aid for American students. And while some private banks and financial institutions offer loans to international students as well, you'll also need to often get a cosigner and pay higher rates. For scholarships, many of you will be looking to programs such as Rotary or Fulbright for scholarship applications. We do keep a list of other organizations that offer scholarships for U.S. graduate study on the Fulbright Belgium website at fulbright.be that you can go check out at the link on your screen. So I'm going to end this presentation by talking a little bit about Fulbright Awards. I'm coming from the Fulbright Commission in Belgium, But the Fulbright program does exist in 150 different locations around the world, which gives a lot of you the opportunity to apply. Fulbright is a program whose mission is to increase the mutual understanding between the people of the United States and people of other countries. So often the Fulbright program is going to be funded by the U.S. government as well as your home country government. It's available to students, to scholars, to researchers, to people in a variety of fields. Fulbright does not fund internships in the United States, and it offers a network of cultural activities for you to participate in while you're in the United States. So it's important to know that the Fulbright Scholarship is not just money, it's also an experience. It's connecting you with other Fulbrighters from around the world who are traveling to the U.S. to do something similar to you. And of course, we do offer funding and J-1 visa sponsorship. We're looking for candidates that always have ambassadorial qualities, meaning that you're able to interact easily with people from different cultures, to explain your own home culture, and to explain your topic or field of study in very simplistic terms to someone who may not be familiar with it. You can't have had a J-1 visa in the student or scholar categories within the past 2 years to apply, and you must return to your home country for 2 years after completing your U.S. graduate studies when you receive this award. The purpose for that requirement is that we want you to take back the newfound knowledge that you've gained in the United States and make a difference in your home country to increase that mutual understanding that we were talking about earlier. The Fulbright program also has a foreign language teaching assistantship program where you can teach your native language at a U.S. university where you're placed. So you're not applying to the U.S. university yourself, you're applying to be a language teaching assistant at a university where the program places you. You also often have the opportunity to take courses that interest you, which is really great if you don't know what field of study you want to commit to for your graduate studies. The FLTA program often covers tuition, housing, meals, and a stipend, and you must take the TOEFL to apply. The Fulbright-Schuman program is another award that's administered by our office here in Belgium. It's for graduate students, doctoral students, or lecturers who are citizens of EU member states and whose projects relate to EU policy, EU institutions, or transatlantic relations. To apply for this award, you do have to have experience of 3 months in at least 2 different EU member states, and one of those member states can be your home country. And preference is given to candidates with at least 2 years of professional experience working with a relevant EU topic. It's a €3,000 per month grant as well as a €2,000 one-time travel stipend. So this is what our website looks like. It's www.fulbright.be. We've made some changes on it recently, so I'm sorry if the picture doesn't look too similar. And this is our YouTube channel. If you go to www.youtube.com/FulbrightBE, you'll find videos with international students from all over the world who have gone to the U.S. to study, and you can hear about their experience. Be sure to subscribe so that you get updates for tips about the application process to Fulbright Awards as well as to U.S. graduate universities. Here is a list of different Fulbright offices for you to contact if you're located in the EU. If you're not, be sure to find an Education USA Advising Center or a Fulbright office in your country by going to educationusa.info and clicking Find an Advising Center. Now we'll switch to the questions part. So if you all give me a minute, I am going to go through the questions. How much does a student's test scores matter when he or she is applying for a doctoral program? If a student has considerable research experience but low test scores, what effect will it have on his or her application? That's a great question. Some people are just not good at testing, and they struggle with the application process. It depends on the program that you're applying to and in the field of study that you're pursuing your PhD in. A lot of PhD programs do place heavy emphasis on writing abilities as well as quantitative skills, so your ability to work with large sets of data and analyze them. So if you can prove those abilities via other research projects that you've performed and published, then sometimes doctoral programs will not take your test scores into account as much. And so my advice to you is to really emphasize the writing and quantitative skills that you have via publications or research conferences that you've presented at, and be sure to include those details in your application. So I had a question about passing the TOEFL or the GRE in your local country. If you go to takethegre.com or TOEFLGoAnywhere.org, you will be able to sign up to take those tests in your home country. Hopefully, if there's not a testing center in your home country, they will give you the location of one nearby. A lot of you have been asking me about scholarships and what's required to get them. Often you will need high grades, and oftentimes scholarships will not cover your full financial needs. Sometimes you will need to take personal funds or loans. So the different funding types that I talked about earlier can be combined. So you may have a scholarship from the school for $20,000 to be a research assistant. You may also take out a loan of $15,000, and then you may contribute $5,000 of your own to fund the experience. That's an example of how you can combine financial resources to meet your needs. If a student's undergraduate degree is not what he applies as his graduate degree, what will make his application stand out from others? I think that in itself makes the application stand out when you're applying for a field of study that is not one of your own. So the selection committee is immediately going to question why you're going to go into a specialized degree for a field that you don't have a background in. And so it's really important that you can highlight your interest, where that passion stems from, what you already do know about the field, so that you won't get into the program and then think it's something different than what you had in mind. And then what you plan to do with the degree after you earn it. I think that will automatically make your application stand out. A lot of you are asking me about specific locations and fields of study in the United States and how to find that. I encourage you to go to petersons.com, so petersons.com, as we found earlier in the presentation, and place those university names or fields of study in the search fields, and hopefully you'll come up with results. A lot of people are asking if they need an admission letter before they're allowed to apply for a scholarship, or is it the other way around? And the answer is it really depends on the scholarship you're applying for. A lot of U.S. graduate programs will have a scholarship process that is simultaneous to the admissions process. So you're applying for scholarships from the school at the same time as you're applying for admission from the school. For programs such as Fulbright, it really differs from country to country. Some Fulbright programs will place you in a U.S. university, meaning that you apply for the Fulbright scholarship and they will place you at a U.S. university that they've selected. Some countries, such as Belgium, will allow you to apply with that letter of admission and then apply for our scholarship. If I'm a student from a European country, do I have to send all of my report cards from high school, or just the levels, A-levels, and SAT? Well, if you're applying to a U.S. graduate program, then you're only going to be supplying your transcripts from your bachelor's degree. However, if you're a student tuned in and you're currently in high school and applying to U.S. bachelor degree programs, then you are encouraged to send the last 4 years of your high school diploma transcripts. I've seen some questions about cover letters. As part of the application process, most applications will not require a cover letter because the personal statement serves as the cover letter. Some people are asking about the visa application process to study in the United States, and that will come after we've gone through this long and arduous application process to the U.S. graduate schools. So once you're admitted, you will either be traveling to the U.S. on an F1 or a J1 visa. If you're traveling directly with the school's visa sponsorship, then they are going to send you what's called an I-20 form. An I-20 form allows you to apply for an F1 student visa at your local U.S. embassy. If you're receiving a scholarship from an organization such as Fulbright, for example, then you may be traveling to the U.S. on a J1 visitor exchange program. In that case, they'll be sending you a DS-2019. These are all very technical terms that you can learn about on your local U.S. Embassy's website when you're applying for the visa. For how long can a graduate student stay in the U.S. after the completion of the studies without having a job and with having a job? That's a really great question. When you travel to the U.S. on an F1 or J1 visa, you have the ability to complete what's called academic training or optional practical training. This allows you to remain in the United States for a year to a year and a half, oftentimes, to complete internships or other professional experience. If you do get offered a job, it will be the company's responsibility to sponsor your new visa to allow you to remain in the United States. And these are all questions that a designated school official can help you with. So when you're admitted to a U.S. graduate school, there will be a designated school official to help you with all of your international student questions. Some people are asking about requirements for Fulbright awards, such as TOEFL or IELTS, as well as can you work during the scholarships. Questions about Fulbright scholarships should be directed to the Fulbright office in your local country of citizenship or residency. Fulbright awards are administered by country of citizenship, and so it's really important that you contact your local office to see what their respective requirements are. And as I said, it is based on country of citizenship, so if your country does not offer Fulbright awards in a specific area of study, then unfortunately there is not much that you can do about applying for a Fulbright award from another country. Some people have asked me about obtaining in-state tuition in order to reduce costs of the graduate program, and sometimes that is possible after you have been living in a U.S. state for at least 6 months. That is something that you should talk to the school's administration about once you arrive, but usually in some states they will require you to have proof of living in that state for at least 6 months to 1 year before they're willing to consider offering you in-state tuition. Some people have asked if I recommend visits to the universities that you're applying to, and of course, if you have the financial resources to visit these universities, then I really recommend it, because every U.S. university's campus has a very different feel to it. And you really get a good sense of whether or not you belong on that campus after you've visited. However, a lot of schools also make their campus tours available online now and offer you the opportunity to chat with current students or school alumni in your area. And so that may also be another option if you can't afford to travel to the school and visit it. Some people have asked, what is required if I want to apply for a fellowship or a teaching assistant position? That's a really good question. Fellowships will often clearly state their requirements on their website. So it is important that you check with each specific fellowship to see what they require. Often it will be some essays and recommendation letters, as well as test scores. For a teaching assistantship, that's usually coming directly from the department of the U.S. graduate program that you're applying to. And so it's important that you reach out to U.S. university professors within that department in order to see if they have a budget to fund a research assistant or a teaching assistant and what those requirements would be. Usually you reach out to that U.S. professor with a 1 to 2 paragraph email, not something very long, because they're often getting a lot of inquiries about funding at the teaching assistant or research assistant level, and you're going to explain what country you're coming from, what research you're working on and how it fits with their interests, and also what your hopes were in regards to a teaching or research assistantship. It's really important that you stay concise and that you really show why you are a good resource for that professor. You can find sample personal statements on the Education USA website, which will also direct you to other websites that have examples of sample personal statements. Some people are asking about community colleges. Community colleges generally aren't addressed at the graduate level, but international students are welcome to apply to community colleges. It's a great option and a great way to find a lower cost pathway to study in the United States. So to find out if Fulbright is supported in your country of citizenship, you can go to eca.state.gov. The Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs is the department of the U.S. Department of State that controls the Fulbright program worldwide, and there you'll find a listing of all the different Fulbright programs around the world. Alright, well, it looks like my time with you is up. I'm really sorry I wasn't able to answer all of your questions, but if you do have other questions, please contact the Education USA office in your local country.